afternoon, ladies, ladies and gentlemen, to a bit of a Propagandacast Addendum. It's something I actually want to talk about after those recent surveys, but haven't been able to talk to because they just kept pushing out all the bloody updates for the December balance preview. But enough about that. Today we're going to talk about some of those concepts we talked about. In this case, we're going to talk about the fall of Germany, 1945. Because it's, actually a surprisingly overlooked, I think, sort of area of the war, but the one which, still has a lot of room for it. In part because, you got the Western Front, you got the Eastern Front. That's all the particular areas of that bit there. Plus, in theory, in the Eastern Front, you got like Germany, and then you got Hungary. So, that one could further split up there a bit further. So there's a lot of room there for just sort of exploring it. It's basically the point where the German army was pretty much just past the breaking point. It was beginning to disintegrate heavily. I think it was during February 1945. They basically sort of disbanded every single training school and whatnot, and just basically sent all the instructors and the students to the front line, as an example. And tank division by that point were also pretty much the same level as a Panzergrenadier division. There was actually no sort of difference there. They had the same level of equipment, organization, and so on. There was just a difference in name. And even then, the Panzer battalions they were supposed to have, the Panzer battalion they were supposed to have, was not even necessarily going to be all of the same tanks. So at that point, things were beginning to just really fall apart there. They still had some veteran troops, elite troops, and all that, but increasingly they also had to rely a lot on just hastily conscripted troops and Kriegsmarine and Luftwaffe personnel just sort of given a rifle and sort of thrust at the enemy. So there's a point where things beginning to look rather ugly. Also there the Volkssturm began coming into part as well. Plus more and more improvised weaponry as well. Bikes with Panzerfaust attached to them and other lovely things. In that regard, fall of Germany 1945 could be sort of conceptually very interesting, in part because, again, it's just not very explored, but because, there's different elements to look at. Plus, the Western Allies were also beginning to run into the issues. The Russians were also, the Third Army was, for that point, increasingly also more veterans, so that they could be displayed a bit more differently, though it's still, to the extent, rely also a lot on raw conscripts, be more mix of raw conscripts and hardened veterans. Equipment-wise, they were looking reasonably well, mostly T-35s, M4C Shermans, all that. But even they were beginning to actually sort of show breaking points, for example. They were beginning to run out of manpower. They were, employing Romanians and, just conscripting everything they could along the way. So, they were beginning to show, cracks as well. And similar to when the Western Allies, they were also beginning to be a problem. So the Brits in particular were long past the point there in terms of manpower. And the Americans were not much better off. They were sort of in part there concerned with the war soon ending. So they were not beginning to get rather skittish, but they were also suffering manpower issues, beginning to recruit African Americans and put those into the front line. So that could also be something they really could then show off. The African Americans would tend, to get, shall we say, a bit overlooked. Though again, for the most part in the war, they didn't show much on the front line, but like 1944-45, there's certainly some room for them, actually be shown off. So that could be something there. But in that regard, it's again an overlooked period. Yes, most people tend to be like, 1944, Normandy, maybe the Eastern Front a bit. There are a lot of parts of the Eastern Front before the team could have looked at the Baltics. That's a very overlooked one. Italy tends to also get pretty overlooked, and then North Africa 1942, 1943, maybe the Eastern Front 1943 around Kharkov and the likes there. So there's plenty of room just to explore that last year of the war with Germany on the Eastern and Western Front. To be honest, there's a lot of things there to sort of take from, and maybe sort of more interesting ways of displaying the German army. How you have to juggle, a mix of veterans and, not very veteran troops, a mix of equipment and breakdowns and whatnot. So that would be, pretty interesting sort of to show off, how would you do that? How could you do that? And similarly with the Allies, how to, show off some of those things as well. Like the Allies would probably have Western at least, but have, material superiority. But again, the infantry was beginning to show strains as well. In particular in terms of organisation. So, those are some, potential, I think, areas that could be really fun to explore and just have some fun with as such. There's also the issue there, just relic, you start thinking more Wunderwaffen, Maus and whatnot, but in theory, they could allow themselves, again, to get a bit age to sort of stuff in some prototypes that did see production, but nobody saw frontline fighting, like the Panther Model F, maybe the Sturmgewehr 45 they could sort of consider, you know, the MG 45. I mean, some of those they could maybe sort of play around with a bit, but even that, beyond that, you know, stuff like the mouse, I'd say, would definitely be off the table. But, you know, some of the more practical elements they could maybe, you know, do a bit of funny stuff with. So, I mean, you know, that could be, you know, I mean, a pretty interesting way. Then the campaign, once again, could be focusing on moving through some of the more, you know, dug-in, hardened German areas. Mix of Volkssturm, Volksgrenadiers, hardened infantry and whatnot being tossed at you. So, I mean, that would open up. I mean, of course, also a question mechanically what they could do to make it more interesting. I mean, the Germans, you know, they would have to look into a way to make veterans that much more harder to sort of replace. But at the same time, you could then sort of maybe form up veteran groups more easily, whereas again with the Western allies, I mean, they're beginning to be so strange themselves. I mean, that could also be displayed with some, you know, reliance on maybe, again, if they added a morale mechanic, that could sort of be shown with sort of lower morale in certain situations. I mean, even the German, their morale to an extent was showing some, but then you could sort of add in like National Socialist officers, which by the way they were, and they were basically the equivalent of the commissars, except probably a bit more insane and ruthless in some ways. So there's, again, a lot of potential. And then if they hit over to the Eastern Front, again, you know, more veteran Russians, but again, struck them with manpower. So, like, they wouldn't have those quite the same large infantry squads unless they're, like, really low quality, because even then, they're sort of rushing in whatever they could. They had more, you know, T-35s, more veteran tank crews. They had learned a lot there. They had, you know, bed spring mattresses, you know, more improvisation. That's what led to, you know, increase their own survival. So there's, a lot, again, potential there. Plus, they could expand into Hungary, you know, maybe Budapest, which was sort of 1944-45. Bit cutting it there, but that could be an option. Maybe the Hungarian army, at least just Hungarian supporting elements. As the war progressed, they would actually spread out Hungarian infantry divisions throughout the, you know, German Reich. So that, again, could be a bit interesting. So, I mean, overall, again, I do think it just sort of, it's been, again, very overlooked sort of, you know, part of the war in terms of RTS games, even FPS games, and thusly could be a fun area for, you know, to explore, try out some stuff, and, you know, try to put together maybe some slightly different Germans and allies and whatnot. So that's sort of my perspective then, so, you know, the 1945, you know, concept. I know, you know, what could be done. I mean, again, how to look into, you know, morale, that I think would be really important there. How to still handle veteran troops and experience, particularly for the German army, which again, we're beginning to run out of it, but you can sort of imagine the sort of maybe like boosting it by forming up, you know, special cadres and whatnot, which was, you know, German measure they particularly took up to there in the late stage of the war. But of course, tanks being much more expensive, harder to replace, and who knows, you know, again, they might not even get the best tank crews there, because again, they were seriously running out of even experienced crews. So those could be sort of some, again, considerable elements. So I think that sort of largely covers it immediately. I mean, I could make another video, sort of gets more thoughts on it, but I'll probably make videos covering some of the other concepts that sort of have planned there. So hopefully you like this video, and let me know in the comments. I'll definitely make them. If you're not, I'm probably not going to make more than this, but, you know, I thought it was sort of more interesting to just try and talk more about some of these particular, you know, campaign concept, thusly game concept, see what could be done with them, what they could, you know, explore, and what, you know, we could sort of expect from them. So again, if you like it, let me know in the comments. This is Imperial Lane signing off, and if you like this, you know, subscribe, like, share, comment on it. You know, feel free to, you know, let everybody else know if you thought this was amazing. If you like what I do, consider donating or pledging on Patreon. Links are in the video description. This is Imperial Lane signing off, and see you all for another video in the future. Cheers.